All right, there's obviously a lot more we could talk about on this subject, although I have really only one question that I'm curious about, which is actually a two-part question, so I just told a lie. For you, what was the worst part of homeschooling? And then second, what was the best part of homeschooling for you?
I think the best part was definitely playing video games all day.
That's so funny is I was thinking the same thing, but for me it was wearing my PJs while I played video
Right,
games.
right,
So yeah,
right.
that was it. Eating pizza pockets.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the best.
No, for me personally, with thinking of like how it affected my later studies at college and then getting into the workforce or whatever, was learning how to be like disciplined and being able to keep a schedule yourself. Because again, technically, at least how we were, raised and how we were homeschooled,
Yeah.
we didn't have something like my mom didn't say like, hey, at 9 to 10, you're going to do this. She would encourage us to, but ultimately it was kind of up to us. If I wanted to spend 2 hours studying biology because I knew I wanted to pass this test on Friday, then I would know how much time to put to it. And so I had to figure all that out, which again, like other students, obviously, whether you're homeschool or public school or private school, you're going to learn to do that. But there was an extra level of responsibility where we had to choose. We knew how much, we got to pick what to do in order for us to be prepared.
I've always thought that being homeschooled is almost a better preparation for college, because when you get to college, whether community or university, your professor is not going to be hounding you and be like, hey, what are you doing? Why aren't you going to class? It's up to you to be on class on time. If you're not there, you'll just eventually get kicked out or whatever. I don't know what they do. But, you will pay for the poor choices you make. Where in high school, from what I've heard, there's a lot more of like, we'll just continue trying to keep you going around. But in homeschooling, it's very much on like it's personal responsibility. You have to do your work. So it was totally natural to go into college and you get your work just like in homeschooling, and then you had to go home and do your work. Yeah. It didn't feel really any different. So I felt like that was a great preparation where you had to manage your own time.
Well, and I think also there are students that are more proficient in some areas than others. Yeah. So if I'm really proficient in study X and I can do it really fast and just move beyond it and not put a lot of time to it, I'm not required to, be there or to put more, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
So again, there's that extra flexibility to focus on also the things. I'm kind of adding two positives or the best, but like I got to pick what I wanted to do. I got to pick all that. I have more control over what I studied, how I studied, to how much, whatever. Where I don't know if that amount of freedom is allowed in public or private school. There probably is to some extent.
Where I feel like you say your mom's, your primary teacher or person helping guide you in homeschooling. Yeah, if she sees a gift in you or something you really lean towards, I really am, whatever that be, science or whatever it is, you're really gifted in this way. She can pick curriculum and really help you kind of steer it in that course to kind of feed into it, say, is this something you would like to do long term? So yeah, the flexibility to be able to, it's not that you just say, well, I'm not a math guy, so we stopped right after first grade math. You still go through all the curriculum, but like if you want to go a little bit heavier on some of the stuff, you can push, programs and curriculum accordingly. Right. So I think the flexibility is just
and even
really
if that's
cool.
not even a benefit just homeschooling, because I do know that a lot of people do that even in public or public school. I should say it's not a drawback to being homeschooled. We're still able to do that too.
Yeah.
So even if anything we've said is like, well, yeah, but I went public school and I got to do that. I got to have that freedom as well. Great. But like we were able to do that too. And I think the biggest thing, maybe to refocus it, is I learned to be independent and to have control over my schedule, how much I need to do to get it done. Yeah. Instead of just like, well, I sat in class for 2 hours, every day in math and, I can't do it. Well, no, like I just had to figure it out. So, I feel like homeschooling really, really benefited. Is there anything different?
Well, as far as a positive, I would just say when you're homeschooled, it depends on what, if you have siblings in the same grade as you will always be the top of the class in grades, in sports. You'll always be number one, which is really cool. So you can really feel good about yourself until you start going into.
I always made varsity basketball.
Of course.
I held the school records for the 100 meter, 400 meter, 800 meter, mile.
Still to this day.
I have the best scores. Yep. I was number one in everything. Yeah. In my grade. Yeah, every year. Yeah.
So it was always fun to be top of the class. It was always a good feeling.
Right. I always had to be, the thing I hated the most was the bullies at school. I was picked on.
It was a lot of fun. Was picking on people at school.
Right. So Yeah, it was kind of a terrifying place being homeschooled as well.
Those upperclassmen are scary.
Right. Really terrifying. Yeah. Horrible individuals. So, yeah, those are probably the worst. No, I'm just kidding.
So we kind of mentioned some of the best things about homeschooling. For you, were there any drawbacks that where you're like, yeah, that was a little bit difficult, more difficult, other than maybe going to university? Were there any drawbacks that you would say, or something that you'd have to watch out for? Like, hey, just pay attention to this if you want to focus on homeschooling.
Do you have one on the top of your mind as I think about it?
I asked the question because I don't. I can't think of anything that I would necessarily change.
I guess I will piggyback on it of what we talked about in an earlier question. That could be a pitfall.
Yeah.
What could be a pitfall? It wasn't for us because I personally look back and I don't regret anything about the homeschooling experience. If someone is not being proactive in seeking out those alternative outlets of sports or extracurricular things or social life outside, like if you just really close yourself off, right? I mean, that goes the same. That goes the same for even like, I mean, quarantine life today, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't have those other outlets, you may struggle. You may kind of go crazy without any other outlets. So that could be a pitfall of homeschooling, which maybe that's why sometimes the stereotypes come, right?
Yeah, and depending on the area you live, maybe you live in a rural, more not as populated area, so there's just not as many programs. There could be a lot of things that could come affect and come to play. But yeah, I would agree. I would think that could be something to where if you just kind of stick to yourself, maybe you could struggle with some of this social skills. Although I didn't really ever come into contact.
But again,
with that.
it comes back to your discipline and willingness and desire to seek those things out.
Yeah.
Because you're right. You could just sit around and do nothing and go, I'm gonna not take school seriously. I'm not gonna seek out those extracurricular things. I'm not gonna go to community. You could just kind of drop all of that and then really be unprepared. But again, we were given the freedom to choose, and then also we were kind of taught at an early age, of like, hey, like you should do this. Like this is going to be important for you for the rest of your life. And so we were, wanting to work hard, wanting to learn how to study ourselves and pass and all that stuff. So,
and not that this is just a homeschooling, but I think painting the picture of like what you're doing today, it will impact your future. Yep. Even if you don't remember any of the curriculum that you did, which I don't remember really any curriculum I took.
But it all built on itself.
But it all built on itself to form good habits to then when you go to school, or I don't remember much of college either, but when you go to the workforce, that's the point where, having those foundations. But it's
like compounding interest of like, as it builds, when you start young, if you handle it right when you're young, it'll just compound on itself, and you'll figure out that college is easy. You'll figure out that getting into the workforce is easy if you're ready to do all that. So again, maybe it's really not whether you're homeschool or public school or private school. Maybe it just comes down to the individual and their willingness to be prepared and work hard.
Yeah, because you could have issues on both sides.
Exactly. Yeah. Sounds like we're kind of all in the same boat.
Kind of does. Just one of us, we do school with slippers on.
Right.
Well, not all kids are anyway. They're using their laptops now.
Right, exactly.
At least from what I've heard.
But that's about it for this segment of the Blathering Brothers. Still trying to fine tune how we're doing it, what it looks like, and all that. Mm-hmm. So please leave your comments below for topics for the future. Yes. Please leave any topics that you think like, hey, I'd be curious to know their thoughts on this. We'll try to get to it and cover it. But otherwise, we'll try to think of some other topics ourselves. But otherwise, please like, subscribe, comment, and thanks for watching.
Catch you next time.